Hello and welcome back to my channel. This series has been one of my favorite manga that I've ever read, and till this day it still remains as one of my top favorites. Heck, this is even the series that made me want to dive into the world of manga and started reading them. This series is none other than Tokyo Ghoul. I started reading this manga right after watching its anime to be able to get a slight glimpse on what is to come for the following seasons, and I was able to experience various aspects that makes this series so enjoyable to read. Before going into today's video, I'm gonna put a little spoiler warning for you guys, just because I'm bringing up certain events that took place in the manga. So without further ado, let's get into the video on sharing my experience with Tokyo Ghoul. As I read through the story of Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re, I managed to pick out some key aspects or key factors that makes the entirety of its story so compelling. And one of which is the story's emphasis on its characters, mostly focusing on their development and the trauma that they've been through. And this is established from the very start of the manga itself, where a normal university student named Ken Kaneki, the main protagonist of the story, was forcefully put into the world of ghouls and undergoing the mental hurdles to be able to accept himself as one of them, but taking into consideration on the fact that ghouls rely on consuming human flesh to be able to survive. This puts Kaneki in a constant spiral of rejection, that he must hurt people around him to sustain himself and survive, but he don't want that to happen. This creates a baseline on who Kaneki is as a character. As I continue to read further chapters of the manga, I managed to observe more mental hurdles and traumas being induced into Kaneki, such as the people that are close to him are killed from just being a ghoul, and the torture that he went through to be able to make things right, but evidently everything fell in tragedy around him, blaming himself for everything that is wrong in the world and continuously put under tough or brutal situations where the only thing he can do is run away. In addition to this, since Kaneki was turned into a ghoul, the primal instinct of consuming humans will collide with his human nature, and it slowly takes over him, which eventually corrupts his morale of being a human, and it sends him down a spiral of insanity. But to be able to contrast this, there are people around him that are willing to provide him some guidance to help him live a new life as a ghoul in society. One of the most monumental moments in Tokyo Ghoul is Kaneki accepting himself as a ghoul and ultimately changing during the torture that he undergone. But he does not completely get rid of this human morale of his. Instead, he merges his pre-existing morale as a human to what he has to become to evidently survive in the world he is in. In my opinion, this is the biggest character development that has happened to Kaneki, because at the beginning you get a character that is so afraid to becoming a ghoul, to then having a character that completely accepts himself for what he is. From that point onward, the pursuit of power slowly starts to reveal itself due to the ongoing conflict between humans and ghouls, whilst both parties are experiencing countless losses. The thought of losing someone close to him took root within Kaneki, where without having a lot of power, the people around him will die, and the only way to do so is through cannibalizing or eating flesh. This gives the readers a sense that Kaneki is delving more into the ghoul side of his, whilst leaving his human morale behind to be able to achieve this particular goal. The more he wants this power, the more he loses control of himself in the insanity that it brings for every ghoul, and it brings him on the edge of no return. When you observe everything Kaneki has been through, it has been nothing but pure tragedy, to the way that he's been tortured mentally, emotionally, and even physically, and it is portrayed by the author's depiction of such horror through manga panels. It provides people with the idea that if this were to happen in the real world and it is targeted towards you, it can easily destroy and break a person. After understanding the torture that Kaneki went through, I looked back at the very beginning of the story to see the drastic change that he experienced from just being an ordinary person in society to a character that is filled with absolute tragedy. There are some series out there where characters are created for the sake of being in the story without giving the readers any sort of context on the reason why they are there in the story in the first place. But in the case of Tokyo Ghoul, important characters within the story are given a lot of depth, where it's through providing them with a backstory that determines who they are as a character, or even certain development that they've gone through. This is prevalent in both Tokyo Ghoul and Tokyo Ghoul Re. One character that fits perfectly is Hide, Kaneki's best friend, and have stuck with him ever since their childhood. Just by knowing this, the readers can already have a huge understanding on what Hide meant to Kaneki and the significance of his existence. As mentioned before, ever since Kaneki has been transformed into a ghoul not by choice, he went through countless sufferings with the urges of being a ghoul, but doesn't want to hurt humans just for the sake of survival and power, and the torture that he went through. Just by being a ghoul, Kaneki has faced multiple hurdles, but the person that manages to bring him back to his senses and tell him to keep on living is none other than Hide. Not only that, the only comfort that Kaneki is able to find is within Hide, because he is the small candle that helps Kaneki to find retribution in himself and give him the courage to keep on living even though the world seems grim. Now, bringing the idea of the pursuit of power, I mentioned Kaneki seeking out more strength to be able to protect the ones that he cared. But in doing so, it forces him to break his promise of not causing harm to the innocents, just to feed on them for gaining said power. The urges of him becoming a ghoul is uncontrollable and slowly starts to take a toll on his human morality, to the point of not being able to control the extent that he's going to become more powerful. Putting the suffering that Kaneki faced previously on top of that, this makes Kaneki have a feeling of leaving everything behind and die. But once again, the person who pulled him out of that thought is Hide, where he understands the circumstances that his friend went through and changing that mindset completely to tell him to continue living. Not only does Hide play a huge role in Kaneki's character, other characters were also given their time to shine in their own unique way in this story, where you get to see their perspective on this entire conflict between humans and ghouls, whilst uncovering the tragic past that each and every one of them has. Take Kisho Arima for example. People would think that Arima only fights for the peace of humanity just by exterminating the existence of ghouls off the face of the earth. But that's not the case, however. Instead, he fights for both worlds, both for ghouls and for humanity. So the role that Arima plays within the backbone of Kaneki's character is the concept of a father figure, considering the fact that he is guiding Kaneki to be able to achieve the peace in the world that he desperately desires, and teaching him about the new knowledge that Kaneki has never known before. Even though Arima's reputation would be tarnished just because he is saving another ghoul, he still continues to pursue the idea that Kaneki, after understanding all that Arima has given to him, has the potential to make a change in this wretched world. In conclusion, the existence of many diverse characters in the series of Tokyo Ghoul makes the overall experience of reading the story compelling towards the readers, where they understand what the main character has been through and the influence that other people have on this particular individual, almost as if the spotlight was focused on them whilst also letting the other characters show what they are all about.
With that said, that's gonna be the end of today's video. Comment down below to share some of your thoughts about the series. Leave a like and subscribe. But other than that, thank you all for sticking to the end of the video. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.